Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dara Connolly, and it is my great pleasure to welcome you to this webinar, which is commemorating the World Antimicrobial Awareness Week, Pharmacy in Action, with a special focus on the Eastern Mediterranean, Europe, and Americas region. I always get a little bit of a tingly feeling when I introduce a webinar like this, because I love seeing the chat box and love seeing where colleagues are tuning in from. So I know that we have people here from Libya, Nigeria, Pakistan, Egypt, Nepal, India, Costa Rica, across the world. And it's an absolute pleasure to welcome you. So if we can, without further ado, I am not going to spend much time talking, I hope, but I'm going to get this really interesting webinar, which will last around 90 minutes, underway. So if we could have the next slide, I'd be delighted to move on. I have a very important job, and that is I am a community pharmacist in a small town in Ireland called Dungarvan. And as I was putting my thoughts together over the weekend for this really interesting webinar, the last prescription that I dispensed was on Saturday evening for a lady who is a long-standing patient of ours, who at the age of 59 just had her second kidney transplant. And I thought to myself, as we move the slides on, why are we having this conversation? We're having this conversation because we want to be able to think to ourselves, and if you'd move one further on, please, as to why we're here. We'll go on further. One more. I want to talk a little bit, back one, thank you. I'm making life very difficult for the person who's doing the slides. So what I wanted to talk about is that we are here to talk about what is the silent pandemic. And if it wasn't for antibiotics, that lady wouldn't be able to have her transplant, or her transplant couldn't be a success. And why I really like why FIP is so involved and committed to pharmacists in their stewardship role, no matter what area of practice they're in, is the commitment to antimicrobial resistance is important for every sphere and every scope of practice that we have. So be that in education, be that in practice, scientific research, or in workforce development. Pharmacists are at the heart of helping people to find solutions for their problems that don't include medicines, which can result in antimicrobials, which can result in resistance. I think we also need to be able to give a platform and an outlook for pharmacists, no matter what area of practice they're in, to be able to say that, look, this is who we are, and this is what we can do, because we can be really good at it. And antimicrobial resistance and stewardship around that is really, really important. So that's my introduction. So if we can go back to the 2 slides back, and I can give you just a little bit of housekeeping. I think the most important one here is the last one, which is to say, if you are not a member of FIP, you really should become one. And there's lots of people on this journey with us through FIP who get a huge amount from it. So I'd like you to consider becoming a member of FIP. I want you to know that this video is being recorded and it's live streamed, and that also means that you will be able to log into it later on. So if you're watching it live, and also you say to yourself, you're making your own notes, you can tune into it later, and that's a huge benefit. You can ask questions, but the way to do that, because we have so many participants, the way to ask questions is to use the chat box provided. And look, of course, like any of these things, as we are in our day-to-day professional practice, we can only get better with feedback. So we'd love your feedback about this webinar and what you liked and what maybe we can do better. So if we move along, I'll just, on a very quick whistle stop, that's my welcome done. And I also want to say then that the second part will be the summary of an education leads gathered through the 5 CPHA-led WAAW, and that will come from Victoria Rutter of the Commonwealth Pharmacists Association. We'll have the findings from FIP Educational Survey on antimicrobial resistance. Part 4 will be interactive, and we'll be gathering the priority commitment areas from attendees. We'll have concluding remarks from Catherine Duggan, who is the FIP CEO, and then we'll do a wrap, and that will all take probably what's left, hopefully 85 minutes. So with that, if we can move on to the next part. The aims of what we're, the aims of what we're doing, as we all know, that we have our goals at FIP is to provide an education and development headline needs, and our development goal then is devoted within the antimicrobial stewardship is number 17, and number 16 is around communicable diseases. And what we want to then come from this is we want to be able to inform the 2023 Commitment to Action and Health Ministers Summit. So with our next slide, we are celebrating what has been this week, which is the Preventing Antimicrobial Resistance Together. And it's done every year between the 18th to the 24th of the year. And as you can see from the excellent poster, that this is done in conjunction with our colleagues in the World Health Organization. So what we want to be able to come out of today with the learning objectives is to outline regional, educational and development headline needs in antimicrobial resistance and antimicrobial stewardship. Outline areas and the priority commitments for pharmacist observation organizations, and those are the development goals. Number 3, input on how they can contribute to FIP's antimicrobial resistance plans in 2023. This is absolutely fantastic work, and this is the FIP commitment on antimicrobial resistance and antimicrobial stewardship by 2030. There's too much for us to read here, but the reason we're putting it up for you to see is that you will be able to log in and have a look at that online, because there's fantastic stuff in there. But please think of this as a taster for you to be able to have a look at that in your own time. Right, without further ado, it is my great pleasure to introduce a video from Ms. Victoria Rutter, and she's the Chief Executive Officer and a pharmacist with the Commonwealth Pharmacists Association from the United Kingdom. So with that, I'll hand you over to our first speaker, and thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, and I'm sorry I couldn't join you live today. I've recorded this message on behalf of the Commonwealth Pharmacists Association. For those of you that do not know us, we are a charity that was established to lead and develop the pharmacy profession across the Commonwealth for the benefit of the people of the Commonwealth. And for those of you that have already joined us for the joint FIP CPA webinar series, AMS in Action, you will have learned more about our work in tackling AMR across the Commonwealth and beyond. We are delighted to have been able to host this series with FIP and have received fantastic feedback from attendees. Many of you may also be aware that in January this year, the landmark global research on antimicrobial resistance, or GRAM report, was published in the Lancet. This report, which reviewed data from 204 countries and territories, gives the best estimate yet of the scale of AMR globally. It reported that in 2019, 1.27 million deaths worldwide were attributable to AMR, making this the leading cause of death worldwide. AMR represents the largest threat to human health in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, but it is important in all regions of the world, with Australasia still reporting 6.5 deaths per 100,000 attributed to AMR. The CPA's work is predominantly with low and middle income countries such as those in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia, who are disproportionately affected by AMR and many other health challenges, including health workforce shortages. As pharmacists, we have a very important role to play in trying to preserve our antimicrobial agents and keep them working. For those of you that attended webinar 1 of our joint webinar series with FIP, Pharmacists in Action, you would have seen this diagram that was presented by Dr. Nandini Shetty, Clinical and Scientific Advisor to the Fleming Fund, a UK aid fund that was set up to tackle AMR. With the ongoing global health workforce shortage, it is not surprising that many hospitals lack expertise in the form of clinical microbiologists and ID physicians, particularly in low and middle income countries. This makes appropriately trained pharmacists even more essential to help monitor and direct appropriate antimicrobial use. The CPA have been working with the Fleming Fund and our partners, the Tropical Health and Education Trust, to train and empower pharmacists to be better equipped to lead antimicrobial stewardship roles within multidisciplinary teams through our Commonwealth Partnerships in Antimicrobial Stewardship Programme, or CPAMS, as you may have heard it called. As part of the CPAMS programme, we've been able to determine learning needs for the profession across Commonwealth countries in sub-Saharan Africa and have worked with pharmacists from these countries to build CPD courses delivered in collaboration with national pharmacy associations. You can see the titles of the current courses on screen here. Currently, they're only available to those who are members of the National Pharmacy Association that have been part of our pilot. But we will shortly be extending this to more members of national pharmacy associations and, in addition, launching a new individual membership option so that others outside of this network can benefit from the courses. In addition to this, we've established learning needs through a scoping exercise we recently undertook with a view of building a leadership fellowship programme for AMS pharmacists in Africa who are part of our CPAMS programme. And this is due to launch alongside our CPAMS 2 programme later next year. It is clear from our work that there is a lot of demand for development in this area, both in terms of building clinical competencies, but also having the opportunities to lead AMS projects, receive mentorship and training to enable people to be effective change agents. We recognise that at the same time, we need to advocate to governance and policymakers about the need to extend the role of pharmacists in many countries, creating opportunities and funded positions to deliver clinical services alongside traditional supply functions. In fact, this has been the approach to our work all along, and the need for this approach has been echoed by many health leaders and policymakers along our journey, such as the quote you can see on screen now from a senior AMR colleague in Sri Lanka during our visit back in 2016. We cannot change the world overnight, but by working together, we can increase the education of pharmacists in this area and contribute to equipping the workforce to take up AMS leadership positions. Our joint webinar series on AMR has been one stepping stone on this journey. This infographic illustrates the spread of attendance across the globe at our recent AMR webinar 1 that we held jointly with FIP. In fact, if we evaluate the whole series so far, it shows that we have had attendance from over 65 countries, which is fantastic. The graph on screen here shows the roles of attendees for our webinar 1, which is also reflective of the overall attendance at our webinar series so far, with just over 70% of attendees being pharmacists. This graph illustrates the current knowledge in AMS across our attendees, and it displays feedback from webinar 1, but is also representative of the webinar series so far, where almost 80% of attendees said that they were either new to or just had some knowledge of AMS, indicating the need for acquiring more knowledge. Over 96% of those completing feedback forms said their AMS knowledge had been improved after attending our webinar series so far. You have given us a wealth of information about topics you would like to see covered in the future also, which we are currently analysing to inform future programmes of work. So I think we can say that FIP and CPA are both contributing well to this space, but we have a long way to go. We need to do more. We've got a long way to go in raising educational standards around AMS for the pharmacy profession globally. We need to work collaboratively to share best practices. We need to advocate for the role of pharmacy in this space, and we need to support each other through policy and legislative changes that need to occur. And we have to do this in order to strengthen health systems and improve the use of antimicrobials. It's our contribution to this. It's not going to solve the whole problem, but it's certainly something that we can do as a profession. Slowing down the development of AMR and preserving our antimicrobials is essential to improve outcomes for patients and to preserve our antimicrobials for future generations. FIP and CPA are on this journey together. Will you join us? Thank you and enjoy the rest of your webinar.
Hi, everyone. If you can hear me, I want to thank Victoria for that excellent run through of the really good work that's being done and how much pharmacists are getting from antimicrobial stewardship and the ability to learn about it, but also to implement it. I'd like also now to introduce Alison Etekakpan, And she's the FIP Educational Partnership Specialist from Nigeria. And she's going to talk about preliminary findings from FIP Educational Survey on antimicrobial resistance. Over to you, Alison.
Thank you, Dara, for that kind introduction. Hello, everyone. So I'm Alison, a pharmacist trained here in Nigeria, and my work here at FIP is to support pharmaceutical education transformation as the FIP Education Partnership Specialist. I would like to thank Victoria for that presentation she just delivered. It actually shows the role of education in combating AMR and also progressing antimicrobial stewardship. For today's presentation, I will be showing you the preliminary findings from FIP Educational Survey on AMR that we have carried out this year. And in my next slide, before I move forward, I would like to acknowledge, sorry, I'm also sharing the screen, yes. I would like to acknowledge the people that we've worked together to develop this survey. You can see their names here on the screen. And we also have to acknowledge Dr. Catherine Duggan, FIP CEO, for her leadership and support of this project. Together, we've come this far, and there is more to do in advancing education in AMR. Moving forward, I would like to give a bit of background and rationale to why this survey was done. There is no doubt that the pharmaceutical workforce plays a critical role in combating antimicrobial resistance and providing antimicrobial stewardship. We do this from the range of drug development up to when we are dispensing the medication and ensuring the medicines are well used. And in all of these, education is central to development and the practice of the profession. And we have that evidence shows that health workers across the globe want to improve their knowledge and level of competencies towards antimicrobial resistance and stewardship, but there is limited evidence to demonstrate what is actually the educational content of AMR for the pharmaceutical workforce globally and across all regions. So we undertaking this project to bridge this gap, and not just bridge the gap, but to share with you today high-level findings to identify the themes and priorities of our member organizations and our nations here at FIP to help us focus the work that we'll do in 2023 to support our commitment that Dara had shared with you earlier. In the next slide, I will just show you here the objective of this survey in particular. We had 3 target audience: the pharmacy educators, the pharmacy practitioners, and the pharmacy students. And our survey aimed to investigate what the educational component of AMR is across all regions from the pharmacy educators' perspective. These are people that are doing the teaching and the giving, but at the same time, in parallel, compare what this component is to the pharmacy practitioners and if it's actually relevant to their practice. And we also had to assess students' perspective on the educational component in AMR, and across all both educators and practitioners collect case studies to showcase best practices on what can be done to promote AMR across all regions. This is just a bit of methodology of what we did. I won't dwell much on this because of time, but we basically are at the point of showing you preliminary findings of this survey with a focus of giving you the detailed report next year. And also to let you know that this was an online survey that was done across FIP network between August and September, and we got quite a number of responses that you will see shortly. But before then, I would like to clearly give you an idea of what this presentation will be focused on. The survey was developed based on the WHO Health Workers Education and Training Curriculum Guide for Pharmacists. So this document has 5 modules that are expected to be used to cover pharmacist education. And at the same time, each of these modules covers the knowledge, the skills, and the attitude. And you can see the 5 modules here on the screen. More information to come shortly, but just to let you know that these were the themes, the parameters on which the survey was assessed, and we assessed the extent of the knowledge, the skills, and attitudes for each of these. In the next slide, stressing again that for today's presentation, we'll be showing you high-level findings from this survey. Preliminary findings, because we are still doing the analysis. And next year, we are going to launch a report that you will see the global results of this analysis. You will see the needs of each region, and you also have a collection of these case studies. So look forward to that. But in today's presentation, it's going to be just findings and recommendations to address the needs based on this theme. Here you would see our respondents. We had 303 respondents across over 42 countries, and most of our respondents for the practitioners' target audience were from the African region, while the educators and students were from the European region. As I had mentioned earlier, that I would explain to us more, give us more information on each of these teams so that we'll have an understanding of the recommendation from this survey. This first theme of the survey, foundations that build knowledge and awareness of antimicrobial resistance, basically expects that pharmacists should demonstrate that they have this knowledge and awareness. And apart from that, apart from having the knowledge and the awareness to
Alison, are you here? We cannot, Alison, we cannot hear you. Oh, Dara, she's gone.
Well, that's a shame. I thought to myself momentarily that maybe it was my line that was down. So that's a pity that Alison has come unstuck. Shall we give it 20 seconds to see if she can join in, or would it be better that we move on to the global speakers and the interactive session?
I'm going to share the slides. I think we can continue.
Very good. Very
She's
good.
back. We can continue with her part.
Okay, Aisu. Right. Well, I'll hand that over to you then to give the next part of the session over to you, Aisu. So I can see then that, yeah, exactly. That is the global speakers who will be joining online. So Aisu, I am going to give up being the moderator just for this part, but just to welcome you, Aisu, to welcome Katya, and also to welcome Khalid. And these are people that I am fascinated to hear about, and also to know that this is an interactive session. So don't be afraid to get interactive. So Aisu, over to you.
Okay, thank you, Derek, for your introduction. And I would like to also introduce my co-facilitators, Prof. Katya Canaries and Prof. Khalid El-Hali. And Prof. Katya is a professor and coordinator of Microbiology Laboratory of Environmental Health, University of Lisbon, Portugal. And Professor Khalid is the Associate Professor and Infectious Disease Pharmacy Consultant at King Abdulaziz University in Saudi Arabia. And now I would like to hand over to you, Katya, for the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aisu, for your kind presentation or kind introduction. Now in this section, we'll start the interactive session, and we'll have the presentation of the priority commitment areas. We want to briefly describe the local priorities to combat AMR and progress AMS, and also to link local priorities with the global commitments presented by FIP. We also want to highlight plans in 2023 and beyond to address these priorities. So it's a great pleasure to me to be here with all of you. And now at the next slide, we'll present the first invited speaker, Dr. Cristina Fernandez from Costa Rica, from the San Juan de Dios Hospital, San Jose, Costa Rica, and also from the College of Pharmacists of Costa Rica. Please, Dr. Cristina, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for this kind introduction. It is my pleasure to present you today the local priorities that the College of Pharmacists of Costa Rica has done this year as a contribution in the fight of AMR and the progress of antimicrobial stewardship programs in my country. First, I would like to thank FIP for the invitation to this workshop, which is an opportunity to show pharmacists around the world the public health initiatives our college has done in the past months, and also to commemorate World Antimicrobial Awareness Week together. I'm going to start with the local priorities, and these local priorities were established last period. And so in first place, we find continued education for pharmacists. College of Pharmacies has coordinated conferences and training programs with different professionals in order to review AMR as a One Health problem. Also, in coordination with the Pan American Health Organization, pharmacists were encouraged to apply for the multidisciplinary certification on AMS for Latin American countries. With this certification, it's expected that pharmacists can develop clinical skills that will let them formulate interventions in an antimicrobial stewardship team, or even implement an antimicrobial stewardship program in a healthcare facility. In this slide, you can see some examples of the promotional materials that were published as an invitation to the pharmacists to join the different conferences and the professional certification. In next slide, we can see our second priority, which is different health campaigns, public health campaigns for promotion and prevention of AMR, using our social media and digital technologies in order to raise public awareness and understanding of antimicrobial resistance, and also the appropriate use of antimicrobials. These campaigns have been done to communicate short messages through social networks, and also is pretended that pharmacists can talk to patients in everyday practice in order to spread the right information population must know. College of Pharmacists has permanent public health campaigns and is open to assist to different scenarios like TV interviews in television, in national television, radio, and podcasts. Our third priority, which is in this slide, is the development of strategies for proper disposal of expired, unwanted, and unused antibiotics. Our college has been working with manufacturers and other actors in order to develop guidelines and protocols for the proper disposal of this medication in different pharmacy settings. With different webinars and conferences, these protocols have been explained to the pharmacists, given the proper training. And as you can see in the next slides, we can see in the next slide, Our three main priorities, education for pharmacists, public health campaigns, and guidelines for unwanted and expired antibiotics, are linked with the FIP commits to combat AMR that were presented today. Finally, I would like to present you the strategies for next year that are included in the next slides. And it includes working with prescribers and other healthcare professionals to identify scenarios where pharmacists can promote effective and safe use of antimicrobials. Also, to keep continuing education for pharmacists and public health campaigns in the different social medias for increased patient awareness about antimicrobial resistance. Finally, I would like to thank you very much for your attention, and I expect your questions in the Q&A section. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Cristina, for your excellent presentation. And now from Costa Rica to the we also will be in Costa Rica, but from Costa Rica to the Latin American countries, the partnership between the Pharmaceutical Forum of Americas and Society of Infectious Diseases Pharmacists. And I would like to present Dr. José Pablo Diaz Madris from the Clinical Pharmacy Coordinator and AMS Director, Clínica Bíblica Hospital, Costa Rica. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. And well, first I want to thank FIP for the invitation. And yes, as previously was discussed, I'm representing the Pharmaceutical Forum of the Americas in this presentation. And basically what we are going to talk, it's about our project to improve pharmacist access to training in antimicrobial stewardship program in Latin American countries. And this is an effort between the Pharmaceutical Forum of the Americas and the Society of Infectious Disease Pharmacists. So to briefly outline what we do this year, we can see the next slide, please. So basically in the Pharmaceutical Forum of the Americas, we have an AMR working group that is directed by Eduardo Savio from Uruguay. And we also have people from Colombia, Ecuador, and I'm representing Costa Rica in this working group. And when we start this brainstorming what we can do to improve AMR in our countries in Latin America, we follow the roadmap for AMR action in the Americas. And we used to have like a little budget to do some activities, and we decided to use that money in education to optimize the use of antimicrobials and support AMS by hospital pharmacists. One of the ideas was to try to train pharmacists with a program we didn't want to do a program from scratch. We wanted to use some other program. And like 10 years ago, I took the SIDP certification. And I don't know if everyone is aware of what is SIDP, but it's the Society of Infectious Disease Pharmacists. That is an organization that is from the US. And they have a very good antimicrobial certification, antimicrobial stewardship certification. And as I told you, I took it like 10 years ago. So my idea was like, try to see if we can get support from them to use that money to train pharmacists. And like I told you, it was just like, let's see what's happened. And fortunately, it was a very good experience. If you see here in the right of the screen, you can see that I sent an email on Monday at 3:04, and like less than 10 minutes after, I received a response from Susan Davis. Susan is the past president from SIDP, and in like, I don't know, like less than 3 months, we received an answer, and we have an agreement settled to start working together. In the next slide, we can see the work from this year. So this is a poster that we present in a Congress this year, and this is the work from myself, Jeffrey Pearson, Megan Jeffres, Melissa Johnson, Scott Bergman, and Eduardo Savio, and also all the group from FFA. And like I told you, our problem here in Latin America is that we don't have a very good training, or we don't have specialized training at all. We have some training in clinical pharmacies, but we don't have a specialized training in infectious disease. So we partnered with them, and basically what we did is that we selected some requirements to take the certification. It was based on employment status. We wanted pharmacists to be working in hospital. We also wanted that they have support from the hospital and some level of English. And together between FFA and the Society of Infectious Disease Pharmacists, we got to give scholarships to 12 pharmacists. And as a baseline, we did like a little survey, and this is basically a very common situation in Latin America. And sorry, before that, we gave scholarships to 6 pharmacists from Costa Rica, 4 from Colombia, 1 from Argentina. And like I told you, this is very common in Latin America. Only 7 of the pharmacists worked in a hospital with a formally approved AMS. And it's a very basic kind of AMS, like a basic in 6 hospitals and intermediate services in 1 hospital. None of the pharmacists have positions dedicated exclusively to AMS, and if they have time, it's only less than 25%. So that is a very common situation. And also something important about SIDP certification is that it's online. The phase 1 of the certification is a study of learning component. Then there's some webinars, and the phase 3 is completing some antimicrobial stewardship related activity. That is something very important to start working on this. So that is basically what we did this year. Next slide, please. Like I told you, we present this in 2022 ID Week a couple of weeks ago, and it was a really interesting session. It really generated a lot of interest for a lot of people, and it was a great experience. Next slide. And to try to align this to the new policy, basically what we're doing is the same, collaborating to develop water strategies to rationalize antimicrobial consumption and minimize AMR. We also want to do some research about this intervention, and like I told you, we are supporting the advancement of pharmaceutical workforce here in Latin America. Next slide, please. And for 2023, we want to support the pharmacists of the 2022 initiative so they can finish the certificate program. One of them already finished all the program, and we're really happy for that. Sometimes the certification or certificate program can take between 6 months and 1 year. We want to publish a in a scientific journal about this project. And for 2023, our main objective for this collaboration is to translate the SIDP AMS certificate program to Spanish. We are really happy about this project because one of the barriers obviously is the language. So we want to translate the certificate program, offer more scholarship for pharmacists, and probably try to escalate the amount to a big number like 50 or 100 pharmacists, so a lot of people can take this certification in Spanish and systemically measure the impact of this intervention. And in this moment, we are already working in a grant submission, and we have some opportunities to do this probably in the first semester of this year. So we're happy about this initiative, and hopefully we can talk about this the next year as well to show you bigger results. And that's it for me. Thank you for the time.
Thank you so much, José Pablo. And I have the information that Alison is with us. So in order to conclude the FIP AMR survey, Alison?
Thank you,
you.
Katia. Thank you, Katia,
Welcome.
for giving me the floor back. And apologies for the internet connection issues. If it's okay, I think I'll put off my camera so I can run the presentation smoothly without any disruption. Thank you. So building on this, we have that the next theme that the survey is covering is regards infection prevention and control. And for this, the competency statement requires that pharmacists need to show not just the knowledge about this, but the understanding of principles of IPC, including the WASH principles. And in the next slide, please, this is regarding diagnostic stewardship and surveillance, which is one area that our survey made incredible findings on. Literally, pharmacists need to show an understanding that they have knowledge about the appropriate use of laboratory testing to guide patient management, including treatment, in order to ensure that the patient receives the right clinical outcomes and also limit the spread of antimicrobial resistance. Then the last area that our survey focused on is with regards to ethics, leadership, communication, and governance. And here, the pharmacists need to show an understanding of the concepts of ethical practice, effective leadership, communication, and governance in the context of AMR. And in the next slide, I will share with you a couple of recommendations that our survey has made based on the findings from this survey. Next slide, please. First of all, for the team that has to do with foundation that builds knowledge and awareness of antimicrobial resistance, we had that most of the respondents indicated having knowledge elements of this team. That means their education and their practice has good knowledge about this area of AMR, but there is less focus on the skills and attitude. And so our recommendations here are that the curriculum needs to be revised in order, for example, to emphasize the relevance of pharmacogenomics in antimicrobial therapy selection, and also changing and diversifying the way that the teaching is done in order to ensure that the students have the right skill set and the right knowledge. Then during experiential learning, developing educational initiatives to ensure that the students have the knowledge of raising awareness of this antimicrobial resistance issue, not just the knowledge, but having the skills to create awareness about this. So these were the recommendations for this team. And in the next slide, which is about appropriate use of antimicrobial agents, here again, we have that there is good knowledge element in the curriculum and the attitude as well, but there is less focus on the skills. So again, what do we do to improve skills? We recommend that there should be an improvement in the methods of teaching to allow for better delivery of the educational content. And students should have the opportunity to learn more about WHO strategies for optimizing use of antimicrobial agents, because when you know this strategy, you can have better skills to implement them. Then again, the role of experiential learning cannot be overemphasized in skill development. So students should be involved in experiential learning opportunities that will better provide them with skills for the proper use of antimicrobials and the others. In the next slide, which is about infection prevention and control, we have that the survey found out that the knowledge and skill elements are well embedded, but again, there's less focus on attitude. So overall, what are the things that can be done to improve students and later the pharmaceutical workforce attitude towards infection prevention and control, the ways of teaching, the syllables needs to incorporate more things about infection prevention and control, but not just knowledge-based, but to emphasize the understanding of this, because when there is an understanding, then the attitude towards it can be improved. Also incorporating a practice-based infection prevention and control training. So that's the recommendation for this team. And this next team, diagnostic stewardship and surveillance, it will interest you to know that across all category of respondents for this survey, the knowledge, the skills, and the attitude was not well embedded in the curriculum. And there is room for improvement across all of these, and it can be done through interprofessional education, ensuring that there's cross-cutting training across the laboratory medicine, pharmacy, and other areas of practice, providing laboratory-based education to pharmacists and pharmacy students to help them understand laboratory needs and why these things are relevant, and relating it to antimicrobial resistance and stewardship. So the curriculum in this context needs to do more regarding diagnostic stewardship and surveillance. And the next team, which is our last team that this survey focused on, ethics, leadership, communication, and governance. Again, we discovered that across the respondents, there is room for improvement in this area. So there is the knowledge element of leadership, but the skills and developing the attitude to implement them is not there. So we need to ensure that we include leadership, communication, and ethics, not just as a single module in our education curriculum and training, but to ensure that they are vertical constructs of our curriculum such that across the educational process, leadership, communication, ethics, and governance is being taught to pharmacy students to develop their skills and capacity towards this. Next slide, please. Okay, thank you. So that gives that overview just shows us high-level recommendations that we found from the survey based on the teams. And in addition to these teams of the WHO curriculum guide, we also had emerging educational components that the responded the survey showed. So for example, we need to provide education to students to ensure that the role of pharmacists in the pharmaceutical industry and sustainability is understood. And also, where does digitalization come in AMR and stewardship, and are the students receiving adequate knowledge towards this? Then across all, because we've observed that there's a skill and attitude gap, the initial education of the pharmaceutical workforce needs to re-emphasize and internalize not just concepts, but skills and attitudes to promote AMR, to combat AMR and promote antimicrobial stewardship. And another thing that we need to know is that for us to have sustainable antimicrobial stewardship practices to combat antimicrobial resistance, there needs to be a change management and improvement science context incorporated into our education curriculum. So these are just emerging themes from the survey. And in the next slide, I'll be concluding by letting you know that we understand that education needs to prepare students for several roles. Pharmacy profession is broad, but however, fundamental knowledge, skills, and attitude is expected to be impacted by education. And of course, later on, there can be specialization. The survey shows that the courses needs to shift from the know, so knowledge, to the know-how, and beyond the know-how to further applications to ensure that students are well equipped with both knowledge, skills, and attitude for combating AMR and improving AMS. So there is a skills and attitude gaps, and this needs to be addressed across the curriculum. We also have that, we understand that there is a one-size-fits-all cannot work because all regions have their different needs and have their different priorities, and the practice of pharmacy varies across the globe. That's why when we make the FIP report in 2023 that will showcase the findings from this survey, we would do it based on regional findings, and we'll also show to you recommendations to address these educational needs and gaps across the regions. So thank you again for giving me the floor the second time to conclude my presentation, and we'll look forward to answering any questions that you have. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alison. We're looking forward to have the final report of this highly relevant survey. And now we come back to the local priority. And I would like to present Katarina Milosevic, a pharmacist, chairman of Assembly of Pharmaceutical Chamber of Montenegro, from Montenegro, that will talk about the effects of COVID-19 on antibiotics use on everyday dispensing practice in community pharmacy. Katarina, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I want to thank all of you about very nice presentation and very nice methods you taught to speak about all these issues that are concerning us like pharmacists. So my presentation will be focused on some things that we find since we were getting all these challenges of COVID-19, and some of the practices that we were aware before came very clearly during this period, because all of the protocols for antibiotic use are present in our country, and the pharmacies are giving antibiotics on recipes, but still some of the practices to primary care and to everyday practice are still in a position that we have all challenges and all problems concerning antimicrobial resistance. So I want to first represent you that in Montenegro we have digitalization in the process of dispensing of medicines, which it's maybe 15 years ago, but from 2017, all pharmacies, state-owned and privately owned, gathered together in one same platform for dispensing of medicines. So this can give you a better control, which is not truly and fully transparent till today, because the pharmacy and pharmacists are just sending their information into the system, but we very rare get information from the system. So digitalization of all these segments and paths in prescribing is still on one way till Fund and Ministry of Health. There is also one part of health system, privately owned hospitals, as some of the pharmacies which are out of reimbursement system, which also have data that we don't share and don't get. So always this part of the information is missing. And a very interesting thing is also talking about primary care professionals and their out of protocol prescribing of antibiotics. So in our country, as I see all around the world, we have the challenges about MS and antibiotics use in everyday practice. So antibiotics dispensing in Montenegrin pharmacies are dispensing on electronic recipes, on from private practice, dentists, specialists, and for example, during the summer, very intensively in ambulance for tourists. And during the COVID time, our pharmacists also get dispensing very big amount of parenteral forms of antibiotics, which in some parts of the year during the COVID-19 were in in hospitals or in primary care ordinations. Next slide, please. So here's a little chart which is showing that in some categories of consumption of antibiotics, we can maybe say that we have less use or appropriate use of the antibiotics, but we see that during the COVID infection, we have decrease of pediatric dosage in antibiotics, and that is because the children were out of school and out of kindergarten. So it is not due to rational use of antibiotics, but it's because we didn't get so many ill children during this period. Also, what we realized between dispensing in between these two COVID years, that the increase of prescribed antibiotics was rising more than 100% in number, which was due to the COVID infection, but also what we see that trend is still up in 2022, and also the prescribed antibiotics are usually out of protocol for some infection disease. Next slide, please. The yellow chart is giving us before COVID information. And as we see, the synthetic penicillins are in higher points, which is not now. And we see that some of the antibiotics used for COVID infection are in peaks and getting into the charts where really out of protocol. So we see that some of the hinolones, which were rationalized before and controlled very well before COVID disease, is again in a rise of consumption. Next slide, please. So here is the conclusion and action which Pharmaceutical Chamber of Montenegro is trying to do in connection with our colleagues joined in the association, and also with ministry and other medical professionals in the field. So as we see that in 2020, we have a very big increase of consumption of antibiotics, which was the impact of COVID infection. We try to underline the strategies to increase awareness of antibiotic resistance and try to avoid the consumption of antibiotics in those fields where they are not needed. In 2020, we see a decrease in need for antibiotics in the pediatric population, and decrease of these also give us theme for some future actions, especially in those young population, to try to implement these knowledges in very early stage of children. They will be next grown-ups, and maybe by working with them, we can do something in prevention of irrational use of antibiotics. So implementation of hygiene measures and some other measures in the children population can give us new strength for fighting this optimal use of antibiotics. In 2021, the increase in antibiotic consumption was seen both in pediatric and in adult populations. And in this year, we have greater number of reported adverse effects of antibiotics from pharmacists. So educational of the general population, promotion of patient counseling in pharmacies related to correct use of antibiotics and reduction of unnecessary use are something on which we are working and making not just work with pharmacists and other medical colleagues, but also with general population. And we have also done promotion for dispensing of antibiotics exclusively on electronic digitalized recipes. During the 2002, the trend of using of antibiotics, especially in the first part of the year, was still present, and especially in months of typical respiratory infection period. And I already mentioned the trend we are seeing, not in many groups, but especially rise in Hinulum group. Formation of joint activities of relevant institutions with Pharmaceutical Chamber of Montenegro, with the aim of connecting and exchanging relevant facts in terms of cooperation and joint actions to reduce the irrational use of antibiotics, especially in primary care. The correct assessment of data, consideration of all facts that affect the consumption of antibiotic, availability of information at all levels is what we think may be the next step we have to work on, because knowing of this data will improve the action of primary care in whole. So the Pharmaceutical Chamber plans continues with these activities relating to fight against AMR and rational use. So thematic lectures, workshops, connecting with the relevant authorities, connecting with medical association and chambers, and joint activities with them. Participation of pharmacists from the chamber in the decision-making process, which was not so well in recent few years. Next tip, please. So plans of Pharmaceutical Chamber and action development for antimicrobials for human AMR is to monitor and find possible impact on prescribing and dispensing practice in primary care mainly. Educational programs for pharmacists about AMR and rational antimicrobial use. Educational programs for patients for better understandings of importance of rational use of antibiotics. Collaboration with authorities in strengthening of regulatory systems, and protocols for proper disposal of expired and unused antibiotics. We still do not have special protocol for this disposal. Role of the pharmacist in healthcare system and power to improve outcome of all efforts towards these and other issues. In 2002, in the beginning of the year, together with our agency and Institute of Public Health, we made one workshop with the name The Silent Tsunami in the Shadow of COVID Pandemic, which was done exclusively for talk about the resistance to antibiotics. And all data that we saw then was saying just this: it's maybe not still tsunami, and it's not silent anymore, because in everyday practice during the end of this year, we are seeing multiple patient and cases with very big issues in healing after healing. So this is my this was my presentation. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Katerina, for your presentation. Now we need your contribution. Please respond to our poll question. You can choose up to 3 options, and the results will be presented at our panel discussion. We'll have some seconds to answer. And now I will pass the floor to my colleague, to my co-panelist, Professor Khalid.
Thank you very much, Dr. Katia. I'm very honored to be one of the facilitators today. So the next and fourth speaker is Dr. Saeed Nuh, the Chairman of Medicines Regulatory Authority at Ministry of Health Development in Somalia. Dr. Saeed, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Khalid. Dr. Khalid, thank you very much. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me all?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you very much all. I would like to, it's my great pleasure to join this event, very interesting event. And I'm grateful to you all, FIP and team. Today we just give you an overview because I think the time is also very approaching on our contributions as a national regulatory authority under our Ministry of Health regarding the AMR agenda. So I think you have these slides, but the key to our contributions was here in Somaliland to develop the national medicines policy, and as we understand, strengthening the health system as general, and also the regulatory system is a key component of the contributing to the AMR agenda, and also is very relevant to the FIP commitment regarding AMR. So we've developed in 2014 the National Medicines Policy, which includes all those key actions to develop guidelines and legislative regulations to control and the prescription, the imports, and also pharmaceuticals. In 2020, in collaboration with WHO country office, essential medicines program, we have developed a national action plan, which is a 5-year strategic plan to guide all stakeholder actions. The ministry, in collaboration with other ministers, to preserve the antibiotic responsible and the prudent use of antibiotics, including the environment. Those are the Ministry of Veterinary, the agriculture. This also just would like to just update you that still we have not yet implemented, but that's a very comprehensive plan, and we would like to continue that commitment. As you know, also the burden of substandard and falsified medical products is very significant, as WHO estimates there are 1 in every 10 medical products substandard and falsified. This includes the first-line antimicrobial agents. So as you know, as regulators, we have the information that there are circulating substandard or falsified products in all regions in the WHO, including African region. For especially West Africa, there was recently cough products. So really, the pattern of these should also be addressed. So we have also had conducting a quarterly based post-marketing surveillance of medicines quality after registration. So regarding the pandemic response, yes, that's very huge. As we know, including the pandemics are now hitting, and the lessons response is very key to strengthen the develop guidelines and also contribute to R&D. So here in Somaliland, we have developed guidelines for case management in 2020, early COVID-19 response, and subsequently we have supported the ministry to roll out the COVID-19 vaccines, and until now we have vaccinated about 25% of our national population. Target population is vaccinated. So key, it was just a pharmacy. It was key in all these activities. So regarding the promotion of rational use of medicines, we've developed standard treatment guidelines for our 3 levels of health system in 2015. And that was followed by rollout and training of frontline healthcare workers. And this includes really antibiotics to treat common maternal child head infections and other infections at hospitals and also other health centers. So, strengthening the national BV capacity, we have trained also in collaboration with the private sector and also with our Somali Pharmacists Association. We have trained the different pharmacy and workforce in medicines policies, in rational use of medicines, and also the AMR stewardship. But still, we don't have a very comprehensive project in which we have outlined, like the Argentine. Sorry, my colleague's presentation earlier was that project was very interesting in Latin America about the antimicrobial stewardship. But here we have just been fostering a collaborative approach so that we can together with the private sector and also the Pharmacist Association, then we can develop guidelines and also curricula so that it will guide our AMR stewardship at national level. Also, maybe next, can you go please next? Thank you. AMR awareness in terms of community education and awareness. Yes, we have the last few years we have been developing. We have been organizing a different events aired through the social media and also through the national mass media, TV, awareness workshops, and also in collaboration with universities like the lead university in Hargeisa. And there was we have been also supporting AMR papers research. So at the events we also present the outcomes or the results of the surveys, but also utilize it as an additional to put together different stakeholders so that we can sensitize the public and the different stakeholders, including academicians, so that we are all on board in the AMR agenda. Also, our contributions includes also strengthening the regulatory system in collaboration with at regional in IGAD region in Africa, and also in the Eastern Mediterranean region under the WHO technical lead. So we have been for the last few years contributing different in terms of post-marketing surveillance. We have conducted 2 AMR amoxicillin surveys, PMS surveys, and interestingly, some of those were substandard falsified, so or substandard. So really, SF and also other registration. Hopefully that contributes to also some of the AMR agenda. So next, please.
Dr. Saeed, can you finish up in a few seconds, please?
Yes, because yes, and I think this just the priorities to FIB AMR commitment. So as you can see in this slide, and you have also emphasized, we have contributed to national action plans or promotion of effective and rational use of antimicrobials, developing collaborations and the partnerships, which are very key, and also the policies and strengthening the regulatory system, which are also key areas that we want to continue. In our next slide, please. In our future plans, so that we can foster this collaborative and stakeholder approach, so that we can sensitize our also community, our stakeholders, collaboration in also research, particularly the bacteria. Those are priority bacterial strains that cause the common infections in our country, so that we have those antibiotic profiles, and then we can utilize that for adapting in our guidelines based on our local generated data. So really, we are planning also to disseminate the STDs and also strengthen our regulatory system. Also a key priority area is AMR research, as you have mentioned. And lastly, the implementation, sorry, I didn't put it here, of the National Action Plan for AMR, which we have developed in collaboration with WHO, and we hope that to seek funding and collaboration, putting together our national stakeholders, so that we can really have a robust plan to address the burden, the socioeconomic and other impacts of AMR. So thank you very much. That's all to you. Over.
Thank you very much, Dr. Said. The next and fifth speaker is Bridget Groves. She's the Senior Director of Practice and Professional Affairs at American Pharmacists Association. Dr. Bridget, the mic is yours.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for having us. Really honored and pleasure to be here today representing the American Pharmacists Association in the United States. I'm pleased to share with you today, if you go to the next slide, the National Action Plan for Combating Antibiotic-Resistant Bacteria. So quickly, as a bit of background, the Federal Task Force for Combating Antimicrobial Resistant Bacteria was established in 2014 to identify actions to implement the original national strategy for CARB. This task force released the original National Action Plan in 2015 and has now been updated to be the new National Action Plan for 2020 to 2025, which I will go over today. So it does maintain the original 5 goals of the national strategy, which are indicated here on the slide, as well as new objectives and targets at achieving these goals. The National Action Plan for Combating Antibiotic Resistance Bacteria, yes, you can go to the next slide. That is great. We'll dive into each one of the action plan items. If you go to the next slide, incorporates specific objectives to each goal of the national strategy. So if you look on a slide that has goal 1 objectives in purple, you will see there, if you go to the next slide. There we are. Thank you. You can see here under goal 1, to slow the emergence of resistant bacteria and prevent the spread of resistant infections. The highlight here in these objectives is around education, which is a critical role of pharmacists and aligns with many of the comments shared by my colleagues here today, as well as a focus on policies and procedures to use antibiotics responsibly. This is, of course, a great area for pharmacists to have role in ensuring members of the healthcare team are aware and apply the guidelines as they're written and indicated. Also within each one of these objectives here, I've aligned in the blue font where it is within the FIP AMR commitment. So you can see how they correspond and align with what we're aiming and focusing on here in the United States within the FIP commitments as well. Under goal 2, they're strengthening a national One Health surveillance effort to combat resistance. So One Health is a focus on all the different factors that impact AMR, including human medical use and treatment, environmental use, animal use. So of course, our pharmacist role here is to support analysis of surveillance, having that surveillance conducted and then analyzed, and pharmacists assuring that they're participating in that within the goals and the objectives there. Again, seeing where that aligns with the FIP comments. And then under goal 3, we have advancing development and using rapid and innovative diagnostic tests for identification and characterization of the bacteria themselves. So it's important for us to assure that we have accurate identification of the infection so that we can assure that we're aligning with an appropriate treatment. So pharmacy certainly has a role to play here when you could do administration of a point of care test and then using a protocol to treat something accordingly. On the next slide, we will see goal 4, which is to accelerate basic and applied research and development of new antibiotics, other therapeutics, and vaccines. Knowing here that research around new and alternative options is essential to assure that we have those options available. Pharmacists have a really important role here to assure that these options are researched and then published accordingly in collaboration with other healthcare providers and team members. And then finally, goal 5 there, to improve international collaboration and capacities for antibiotic resistance prevention, surveillance, control, and antibiotic research and development. So we really see this focus on international collaboration around mitigating the effects of AMR across the globe. And that's really consistent with the FIP commitments. So pharmacists connecting and collaborating through FIP and other organizations throughout the world to share their findings and best practices in an effort to positively impact outcomes. And then on my final slide, you'll see a few selected specific plans and actions around the goals and objectives of the National Action Plan. This is really just scratching the surface of what is being done. And a few highlights here is focusing on training and education, on infection control for all healthcare providers, including pharmacists and pharmacy team members, educating the public on how germs spread, what antibiotics can be used, what they're treating, so bacterial infections versus a viral infection, and then how to appropriately use them to make sure that you're covering for that length of the infection. And then finally, incorporating health equity and social determinants of health considerations in all aspects of care is essential, but assuring it is in place for AMR is important to mitigating overuse or inappropriate use. Again, really grateful for the opportunity to share with you today. APHA, American Pharmacists Association, is pleased to be a strong supporter of FIP and to connect and collaborate with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bridget. The next and sixth speaker is Dr. Curtis Collins, who's presenting on behalf of American Society of Health System Pharmacists. Dr. Curtis, the mic is yours.
Yes, thank you. And good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. What a tremendous opportunity to be here, and I congratulate everybody on their just incredible work. Yes, as I'm an infectious disease clinical pharmacist, practice every day. I am, as Halid said, representing the American Society of Health System Pharmacists today. In the interest of time, I know we're up against it. I'm going to jump ahead to a couple slides. Dr. Groves did an amazing job of covering the United States National Action Plan, which really guides a lot of what we do in terms of antimicrobial stewardship. If you could jump ahead 2 slides, please. And another, please. And as Dr. Groves outlined, that really outlines with the FIP commitments, which I just think are wonderful. Next slide. Now, out of that National Action Plan, we've seen tremendous growth over the last 8, 9 years in antimicrobial stewardship in the United States. It is now in hospitals a regulatory requirement that each hospital will need an antimicrobial stewardship program. They are varying requirements based on that, but the requirements are based on, for the most part, the blueprint of the CDC core elements for hospital antimicrobial stewardship. Within those guidelines, it is very pro-pharmacy friendly. I would highly encourage everyone to take a look at those. In 2018, the recommendations changed, stressing the importance from drug expertise to pharmacy expertise or pharmacist expertise. Next slide. And because of these commitments to stewardship and antimicrobial resistance, we've seen tremendous growth for hospitals that meet all 7 elements of the recommended core elements of hospital antimicrobial stewardship, moving from roughly 40% in 2014 all the way up to over 90% of hospitals are now meeting elements of each of those 7 elements. Next slide. At the organizational levels, one thing that we're really excited about and have worked on over the last couple of years is an updates to both the Society of Infectious Disease Pharmacists as well as the ASHP joint statement on the pharmacist's role in leading antimicrobial stewardship efforts. That is open right now for public comment through November 28th. So we would love to hear from you on the recommendations that are within that document. Next slide. Which generally they do align with the FIP commitment. Slide, please. And again, stressing that pharmacists really have a responsibility to promote antimicrobial stewardship and should feel empowered to optimize antibiotic use. That stresses training and education as the FIP commitment does, and really is kind of an all-encompassing document that is really based on the CDC core elements and the National Action Plan. Next slide. And one thing in there, in the United States, I think it's important to report as well as track antimicrobial utilization and resistance. Our joint statement supports efforts within the United States to report antibiotic use data to the Centers for Disease Control National Healthcare Safety Network's antibiotic use and resistance measure. You can go to the next slide. Right now, that is currently voluntary within the United States, and reporting is challenging. And so this is our United States percent of hospitals that report antibiotic use into the United States CDC. And it varies by the United States state. In my home state of Michigan, roughly 40% of hospitals report antibiotic use into the CDC. Next slide. That measure is very useful in terms of tracking a risk-adjusted antimicrobial use measure and reports that so we can gauge how is our antimicrobial use compared to like peers around the country and even within our state. You can see from this graph, practice varies across the country. Those in bluer have a higher standardized ratio. Those in white have lower or lower reporting of antibiotic use. Next slide. Now we are excited. There's regulatory measures that, because reporting is currently voluntary, this will no longer be the case. In the year 2024, required reporting will occur for both antimicrobial use and hospital use level resistance data into the NHSN. So that'll be a required commitment moving ahead, and one that I think most people are excited about. Next slide. So I mentioned I am representing ASHP, and I would encourage those to take a look at some of the ASHP resources. And I think that organization has done a lot of work in antimicrobial stewardship, including supporting and disseminating standards, guidelines. You have to have a seat at the table. So ASHP is active in trying to promote pharmacists on some of our national committees. And then ASHP has long been a big advocate for the support and advocacy of infectious disease residency, specialty training for our residents. Next slide. And as we look forward, one of the guidelines that I'm most excited about in the coming years is an update to the surgical prophylaxis guidelines, which is currently in use. So in summary, some significant advancements within the United States. We've seen a tremendous growth in stewardship. And, mostly I'd just like to thank everyone listening and on this call for their efforts. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on really antimicrobial resistance and antimicrobial stewardship is still being determined. And I know many of you are on the front lines for that. So thank you for your efforts.
Thank you very much, Dr. Cortes. And now our last speaker is Dr. Ulfat Faqih, instructor at Al-Razi University in Yemen. Dr. Ulfat, the mic is yours.
Thank you.
Firstly, thank you for your invitation, and hello to all the participants in this event, from pharmacists and interested people around the world. I will introduce myself for the second time. I am Ulfat Al-Faqih, a pharmacist. You work as an instructor in Razi University and a participant from CPOS Yemen. I will summarize what was mentioned and our procedure in our country in Al-Mahwit Summit for antimicrobial resistance. Okay, the first slide. Al-Mahwit Antimicrobial Resistance Summit. Political Authority, Health Authority, and CPOS Yemen all are gathered in the summit regarding antimicrobial resistance. This meeting state the first slide, not that. The previous slide. Okay, yes. Political Authority, Health Authority, and CPOS Yemen all are gathered in the summit regarding antimicrobial resistance. This meeting states the draft recommendations for antimicrobial resistance, antimicrobial stewardship, which seems to be more compliant to FIP, Antimicrobial Resistant Commitment. These recommendations summarized and sent to the Minister of Health at the government. Last slide, please. The summit recommendations. All healthcare professionals are responsible for establishing a general frame for antibiotic rational dispensing and use. Each governorate constitutes a subsidiary antimicrobial stewardship committee connected to others through the Central Committee at Minister of Health. All members are responsible with code of conduct. Any antibiotic presentation or dispensing must be based on culture sensitivity. Arrange with local drug authority to use confidential product from GMP or good manufacturing practices. Manufacturers have good quality control measures under supervision of drug authority. Arrange with stakeholders like Ministry of Agriculture, Veterinary Medicine Affairs, and departments responsible for antibiotic and drug disposal. Last slide, please. List antibiotic reservoir as a controlled drug for complex and emergent cases. Enhance vaccination awareness among healthcare professionals, community as a good tool to save antibiotic use. Intensify pharmacovigilance program, AZ and comfort operation. Set a plan for sequential antibiotic use, seasonal antimicrobial stewardship plan. Antimicrobial stewardship committee write annual general instructions for all the healthcare professionals regarding optimal use for antibiotic in accordance to drug therapeutic committee for each various medical specialty. Last, please. CPOS Yemen is a major health player. We are in CPOS, support the syndicate with excellence, the practice in Yemen. We are suffering from shortage in resources and funds, which we benefit from FIP partnership with the WHO to fund our programs in Yemen as 90% of health and devise in the country supported by WHO. That's all my presentation. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ulfat. For the speaker, I would like to reinforce that you can answer directly at the Q&A because of time. And now, can we see the poll results, please? Okay, interesting. So I think the number one answer by 40% of people is promoting effective, evidence-based, safe, and responsible use of antimicrobials within the community and all sectors. And after that, equal percentages, 17%, is building leadership capacity, collaborating with multidisciplinary teams and various stakeholders to develop wider strategies and guidelines. And the third one is strengthening regulatory systems through surveillance of medicines quality and antimicrobial resistance national action plans. Thank you very much for participating in the poll results. And I would like to thank the panelists and audience. And now I will hand over to you, Tarek.
That was absolutely fascinating. And to have such a representation from different aspects of practice as pharmacists from around the world is really inspiring. We're running over time, but we're running over time because we had such fascinating presentations. So thanks again to all our speakers. I am going to now hand over to Dr. Catherine Duggan, who is the FIP Chief Executive Officer, and she joins us from the Netherlands. And just to let her know, I have 5 minutes at the end, which I'm not going to take, and I'm happy to hand those 5 minutes over to you for a wrap up and a sum up, Catherine. So it's lovely to see you, and please ease into my time as you see fit.
Thanks so much, Dara. As ever, such a great team player. What a fabulous event, colleagues. And I've taken a couple of nuggets away with me today. Sometimes the entire agenda of what is facing us, this silent pandemic, is a little overwhelming. And at FIP, we can provide you with global commitments, and then that can feel very tricky to think about what is a priority or what's doable in practice. So what we want to do is to support how our work aligns with the WHO work, and then how your work aligns with our work, and how we can support your work already. So we do something once and we count it for many times. And that's the only way I think we can get our heads around the enormity of this issue. We know at FIP you can do things alone, and that's amazing when we can see how much work is being done by our member organizations and our nations. We can do things in partnership, and so many will be inspired today when they've seen examples of great practice from different countries. And I'm sure they will reach out and get in touch. And we want to be able to push and post all of the examples we saw today on the microsite at FIP and put you all in touch with each other. And then, of course, there's the thing here about doing it for others. I thought it was really, really important to hear how we need to empower children in this agenda. And for me, AMR is as big in my mind as a medicines expert, as a pharmacist, as climate change maybe. And we know how much the younger generations have championed that and almost put some of us to shame. So I think that was really, really important. We'll get our younger generations involved in this initiative and get them thinking about everyone in their families, in their schools and beyond. And I also thought Dara does this always so brilliantly about bringing it right to the nub of the issue, about thinking about a patient in front of you, your 59-year-old Dara with the kidney transplant. Just make sure that we keep in our minds who we're doing this for, not just for our member organizations, not just for WHO, but for the profession that we love. So we saw today some education needs for our undergraduates, some CPD needs, the advocacy needed, the campaigns underway in many countries. We have more to showcase tomorrow. The evidence base that's needed and the drug discovery issues. I also saw questions, Dara, where we might want to deploy some of those to the different groups across FIP. For example, medicine safety to various experts in our special interest groups under BPS. Then we've got to think about the use of technology and information sharing. The thing here is that everything is important. Everything feels urgent, and we need to be able to bulk it up, make what we do count in more than one place, and prioritize what we're doing. So we will come back to you after these two events with a bit of a showcase of what you have shown us today, the great work that you've been doing, the way in which you can support each other with those priorities, and then we can support you, so that we align our work with the WHO call to action, and we make sure that the commitments that FIP is promoting and pushing forward align very clearly with what the health ministers need to hear and see, so that pharmacy is part of the solution. We want to build a plan for 2023 and beyond, but to really showcase some of the great work you have shown us today with the Health Ministers Summit next year in Q4. So I think, Dara, that's my summary, keeping it real about the patients that we serve, giving us an imperative about the youth and empowering them to really campaign with us, but looking at the showcase of work we've seen today. There's much to share with others, and we will endeavour to do that. Thanks so much, Dara, for your chairmanship, to the team and everyone involved. Thanks a million.
Catherine, fantastic. I am looking at the chat box here, and there's some really, really nice messages coming in from colleagues who've participated today. And I'm delighted to see such a positive reaction to our webinar. It's been absolutely fantastic. And again, I can't emphasize enough how much I would love you to join FIP if you're not already a member of FIP, because we didn't even get a chance to touch on it today, because antibiotic stewardship is now going further in everyday practice for community pharmacists to prescribe for urinary tract infections or for upper respiratory tract infections around the world. So know that even if where you are practicing, you feel that maybe your ability to contribute is a little bit held back, know that there are lots of pharmacists around the world who are forging ahead with this. But the way you're going to know about that is by engaging with FIP more and more. So again, thanks a million to the fantastic presenters that we had from around the world. It was really fascinating, and I'm actually going to go back and look at the video because there was so much going on that I want to pluck out from it, and I know people watching will want to be able to do that too. But the last round of applause that I want to give is to the team for putting together a really fantastic showcase and organizing brilliant speakers. And the thing ran so smoothly, apart from one little glitch. And I want to really say to Alison, well done for getting back on the horse so well, because that is not an easy thing to do when the tech lets you down. So look, everybody, a hugely positive interaction that we had today. And yeah, long live FIP and long live pharmacy. Have a great evening, have a great afternoon, have a great morning.